Hey guys, it's GameFace here and welcome back to a little bit of a different video. Today I'm going to be telling you guys my top 10 favourite career mode teams, or the teams that I think are good to do career modes with. It's in no particular order, so even though it's a top 10, it's not really sort of a first and second place, etc. It's kind of just the 10 teams which I feel are really good to do career modes with. I've even done career modes with them, or I've not done but plan to do career modes with them in the future. So we are going to go through them, and we will start off by going into the English Premier League, and then obviously going through some other leagues as well, which I'm interested in doing career modes with, and I think can be really good teams to do them with. So before we get into things, if we could go ahead and hit 35 likes on today's video, then I would really appreciate that, and if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well. It'll be absolutely fantastic. Let's crack on with the first team, which I believe is very good to do a career mode with. Okay, so here it is. Leicester City is the first team that I'm going to be telling you about. Basically, obviously, as you all know, they won the Premier League last season, and the reason why I think this would be a really good team to do a career mode with is because obviously they've got a decent budget. They're now in the Champions League if you choose to put them in the Champions League, so that's the extra competition. You've got to try and continue that, try and retain the Premier League if you really can. Obviously, you've got the challenge of trying to compete against the other teams in the league, so it's a tough career mode. You've got a decent sized budget though, and obviously you've got Champions League football now as well, so it's about kind of building on what you've just achieved last season. So the Leicester City career mode would be quite a good one, I think, for a lot of people if you would be interested in using that team. But there are a couple of other teams as well that maybe you wouldn't really expect to do a career mode with. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so the next one is Leeds United. Now, I'm a little bit biased in saying this because I support Leeds and I'm currently doing a Leeds career mode, but this is certainly one I definitely recommend for people, because obviously it's kind of a career mode based around developing your young players. There's a lot of young talented players at Leeds which you can develop on career mode, so I would really recommend starting Leeds one if you haven't got one already. I know there's a lot of Leeds fans watching this, so they probably already have one, but if you're not and you don't have one, I would certainly recommend you doing one. Obviously, you've got the challenge of trying to get back into the Premier League, which hopefully Leeds can try and do this season. They're on the right track to do it at the moment. But you've got that challenge, then you've got to try and stay in the Premier League, build to the Europa League, Champions League, and then trying to win the league again. So it's quite a few seasons. It'll take a long time to develop. You've also got to develop the youngsters as well. But certainly a really good challenge, and definitely one where you can kind of go on for sort of 3 or 4 seasons, if not longer, trying to sort of sustain and build on the club. And you've already got the foundations in, so yeah, it's a really good career mode. I think I'd certainly recommend this one if you haven't already got one with this. And let's move on to the next one. So the third and final one in any of the English divisions is going to be Portsmouth. Now, they've got the highest budget in League 2. They're still in League 2 this season. I did one with them last year off camera with Portsmouth, and it went really well actually. I found some really good youngsters, sold them on for loads. You have to initially start with a lot of loan players for like the first sort of 2 seasons most of the time. Obviously, if you're a better budgeter, then you'll be able to sign some players, but not particularly good ones. And it's a really good challenge, again, getting them through the divisions. Obviously, they're in the Premier League not so long back, winning the FA Cup. I think 2008 seems to spring to mind when they won the FA Cup. So they've obviously fallen quite far since then. But it's a great challenge to try and get them back in the Premier League. It's something I did last year on FIFA 16, and it was a really good challenge. You can sign some decent players further down the line, but to begin with, you've got to sign some loans and get some young players into the team. But yeah, it's a really good challenge, that one. Obviously, you have the biggest budget in the league, so you're expected to do well in it, but it still is a very good challenge getting through the divisions and trying to get back-to-back promotions as well, which can be quite tough usually. Okay, on to the French league now, and it's going to be Lyon is the next team that I think you could really start a career mode with. It could be quite a decent one as well. They don't have the biggest budget. That's the reason why I think this could be a bit more of a challenge than people think. They've already got a pretty decent team, a lot of sort of youngish players, sort of that 24 to 20 kind of region, and they do have loads and loads of good young players and quite a small budget, so you've kind of got to work with what you've got at the moment, which is quite a good challenge in itself. And obviously you're competing with the likes of PSG, obviously Nice as well, who are doing pretty well in real life, and Monaco, so there's some other big teams in there that you've got to compete with, but certainly doing one with Lyon I think would be pretty good. You've obviously got Lacazette, Fekir as well. There's loads of other players in that squad, but you don't have a particularly big budget to buy in players, so you've got to really use what you've got, and it could be a really good option, that one, for those people that aren't really interested in signing players, even though personally for me that is one of the best bits. But some people like to kind of go with what they've already got, and this would be the perfect team really for that. And yeah, let's move on to the next one now, out of the French league. Okay, so coming out of the French league now and going into the Bundesliga, obviously Dortmund, another team that many of you might be watching this because you watch this career mode, and currently doing a career mode with Dortmund. but it is a fantastic one, a really, really good team. And the reason why I think this is a particularly good one is it's got a decent transfer budget, not loads, not the biggest budget on the game, obviously, but 42 million to try and spend. You've already got a pretty decent team, some really, really good players, but you've got the challenge of trying to beat Bayern in the league. Bayern Leverkusen as well, I found on this game, are really good on career mode. So you've got the challenge of beating those two, but you've also got a challenge of, in the Champions League, trying to do something as well, because they're not often competing particularly far in the Champions League, so you've got to try and win the Bundesliga and also get far in the Champions League. So maybe one that you probably do for a couple of seasons and a quick career mode, basically, that you try and just achieve everything that you possibly can. Like I say, I'm currently doing this one myself at the moment, and I am really enjoying it. There's some really good players that we've got in the team as well. There's the likes of Emery Moore is certainly a highlight in that team, and it could be a particularly good one for you guys if you want to try and develop some other youngsters as well. Certainly Borussia Dortmund I would really recommend. And let's move on to the next team. And the next one is Milan, AC Milan, a team that I've often contemplated actually doing a career with, but I haven't just yet. Basically, this team, I'm sure you know, used to be really, really good. They've obviously not been quite as good in recent years. I think they're starting to come back a little bit in the Italian league, although I can't say that I watch loads of it, but certainly I have heard that they are starting to get some better results now. They've obviously got Donnarumma, the goalkeeper, the really young goalkeeper that you can train up. He's probably one of the highlights of this team in terms of the youngsters that they've got, but certainly just a really good challenge, trying to obviously beat Juventus, Napoli, the other teams are also in there as well, Inter Milan. So it's quite a nice challenge. You're not the best team in the league here, but you do have some decent players, and also you've got a good budget as well to try and bring in better players. So the challenge is obviously trying to win the Serie A, or it used to be called that, it's not anymore, the Calcio A, I think is how you pronounce that one. And then you've also got to try and get into Europe and win all the different sort of European things as well further down the line. So it is certainly a challenge, this one. It really does have some decent players, good youngsters as well, but it is also a challenge in trying to win the league because it's very, very competitive, with Juventus being the main sort of team in there that are going to try and win it every year. So Milan, probably a really good team to do one with, and I'd certainly recommend doing that. It was one team that I've been looking at to try and do one with in the future. I'm not 100% sure yet myself, but certainly one that you should try out. Now onto a little bit of a different one. Maybe not everyone decides to do a career with a Dutch team, but this one is obviously Ajax. Now I know they're one of the better teams in the Eredivisie, but I still think that this will be quite an enjoyable career. Now the main reason behind that is you've got just under 13 million to spend, but you have some really, really good youngsters, and that's the point. You've got some really good youngsters to develop. You can obviously develop more youngsters, get a good youth academy going, and it's a really good one if you want to try and develop the young players and try and use regens and that sort of thing. Ajax is probably the really good one for you. Not a massive budget, but you don't really need to try and sign scouts. There's obviously a little bit of competition in the league. You've got obviously Feyenoord in there as well, and a few others, PSV, but there's not loads of competition. It's enough really though, I think, for a challenge. Ajax I certainly think will be a very good one, but it's mainly this one about developing the young players, and obviously, you know, when you win the Eredivisie, you've got to try and get into Europe and try and do well in Europe. That's probably the harder challenge and something that might well take a few more seasons, but still another good team to try and do a career with. Okay, the final three all now come in the La Liga. So the first team is Athletic Bilbao, now a team that I think are 7th in the league currently this season. Not a huge budget, just under 15 million, but another team with a really good youth system, some really good young players. Laporte obviously springs to mind really when you think of Athletic Bilbao. He nearly went away obviously to various different clubs in the summer, but some really good players in their 4.5-star team. Obviously, the competition is pretty obvious, really, isn't it? You've got Barcelona, Real Madrid competing with them, especially Atletico Madrid as well. So some really, really tough teams you're competing with. Obviously, the expectation is not to win the league in your first season. It is another one of those sort of ones where you've got to kind of build on the team, develop those youngsters that are already in the squad, and try and have a really good season. A few seasons down the line, obviously compete for sort of top 4 or 5. And yeah, another one that you can again probably string on for maybe 3 or 4 seasons, if not longer. A really good team, nevertheless, to try and do. And Sevilla, a team that are doing really well at the moment in the Liga. A team that I've actually really wanted to try and do a career with. They've got some really good young players. Some good players all round as well, not just young ones. They've signed Jovetic recently, and he has scored obviously a goal to end Real Madrid's, I think it's a 40 win streak or 40 games unbeaten or something like that anyway, in La Liga, a record for La Liga as well. But he's just scored the winning goal to end that run for Sevilla. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why I kind of thought I'd look at them. They're a 5-star team as well, but also just under 30 million to spend. And they've got a decent team. Ben Yedder, Nzonzi as well. They've, I was like to say, got Jovetic, so some really good players, and probably a good career to do as well, because you've got the competition of the other clubs, like I've said before, in the Liga, Barcelona, Real Madrid, those sort of teams. And you've also got to try and win the Europa League, get into the Champions League, and see how you get on in there. So Sevilla, again, will be another one for a decent career mode. And last but not least, it's going to be Valencia, the final one of today's video. And the reason why I think you should do one with Valencia, I did one briefly last year with them, and they do have some really, really good players. They're just not doing that well in the league at the moment. I think they're just above the relegation zone, I want to say, in La Liga. I think they're about 17th, roughly, something like that. But they've got a huge, huge budget to try and spend and bring in loads of different players. Obviously, they've already spent quite a lot of money. They've got loads of different players, many of them on loan, also many as well signed permanently. I think they've got Nani, I'm pretty sure. Mangala they've signed on loan as well. They've got loads and loads of players, Valencia. The challenge is to try and prevent them from not being relegated, but prevent them from having a bad season, basically. Obviously, in real life, they're not doing particularly well at the moment, but the challenge with them is to try and get them back up to the top where they belong, and competing again with sort of the likes of Barcelona, Real Madrid, those sort of teams, and trying to get in the top 4 or 5. Again, another team that you can try and get Europa League with, Europa League to begin with, and then Champions League later down the line. But another very good team, a strong team as well, with a huge budget for you to spend loads and loads of money on if you choose to. And yeah, that pretty much concludes the 10 teams I think you should do career modes with at some point on FIFA 17. And that is everything for today's video. Hopefully you guys agree. If you have your suggestions for teams as well, are very good to do career modes with, let me know in the comments below. And if we could go ahead and hit 35 likes on today's video, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well. It'd be absolutely fantastic. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.